Good morning, everybody from the Southland. Weather is beautiful. It's going to be in the low 80s today. Just unbelievably warm weather. I'm used to nice weather around Thanksgiving here in San Diego, but this year has been a little warmer than average. But like I say, it's usually pretty pleasant at this time of year. And then it cools off a little bit going into December, but then by Christmas we usually get a nice little burst of nice weather, and around the Super Bowl it's pretty nice usually. But eventually this stuff has got to break. As you can see, kind of weird. All week I haven't seen any forecast for rain, but all of a sudden here they are showing us like a little bit of a rainy cloud here on Friday. But if you look really close and look at the precipitation that is expected that day, 24% in the early morning hours and then pretty much nothing. So it's not going to be anything to worry about. The temperature is what I worry about. Only 66 degrees with a little bit of clouds. That might be a little chilly-ish. When the sun's out, that's a nice temperature. When it's cloudy, not so much. That's one of my days off, as it turns out. So kind of bummed on that one that they decided to put this kind of weather on my day off. I work tonight pretty early in the evening, around 4 o'clock Pacific, so I don't have a lot of time to goof around today. I'm going to take a bike ride a little bit later. Probably don't have time to head down to the beach because I'm making a video now, and I guess if I made this video and left right away, I could get a little bike ride in down there. So maybe so, who knows. But at any rate, let's get down to what we came here for. This is the Scoreboard Show. It's going to be not a thorough Scoreboard show, perhaps, just because I'm running a little behind schedule. I meant to do this thing yesterday, and I'm under the weather a little bit. Not really bad. I just had a cold, and to be honest, it wasn't that. It was really me just doing a lot of brainstorming. I was working with spreadsheets yesterday on my basketball league because I plan on converting that league to a league where you have a limit on minutes per position. Right now it's best ball, and so your top three forwards, top three guards, and top center plus a flex player make the box score, and it's the best of your team. But the problem with that is that you can get more minutes at a particular position than you would in real life. In a real life NBA game, there's 48 minutes per position, so 240 minutes available for the game. And what I'm doing is I'm taking the fantasy scores each scoring period, and I'm dividing them by the minutes the player played, and then multiplying them by the minutes that they would play for their fantasy team. So basically, this affects the bench players the most, the guys that are coming off the end of the bench to fill out the last 96 minutes at like forward or guard, or the last 48 minutes at center. Those players are going to have their stats divided by their number of NBA stats and then multiplied by their fantasy stats. So that's what I was doing. I know how to use spreadsheets and everything, but it had been a while, so I had to get refreshed on, just how to do the calculations, how to operate them. And also I wanted to set my spreadsheets up in a way where I could do the job quickly. And so I was spending a lot of time on that. Because I have an intricate playoffs too in that league where each player gets a random draw from the regular season, 3 random draws from the game periods of the regular season, and we have 2 game periods per week in that league. So there's a lot of periods to draw from, and I just wanted to figure out how to format my spreadsheet so that I could do these games quickly and get on to just enjoying the games. So that is that. Enough business on basketball. Just letting you guys know what I was doing. I am kind of in a way advertising to you guys who aren't in the league yet. There are a few of you in this league that I would like to see join, but I realize you guys are not big basketball fans. But if you're fantasy sports fans, this league might be something you would be interested in because it's run by me. And you know me, I always try to make things interesting and competitive. And I'm introducing a contract idea this next year, where you just state the number of years you want to keep a player, and then they become unrestricted free agents after that period. Things like that. I mean, it's going to be a fun league. I just have to live long enough to see it through for a few years. I'm hoping to stay pretty spry into my old age and run this league for many years to come. All these leagues. At any rate, you're looking at the standings here in the program football league, and I included only the helmets of the teams that are still alive in their hunt for a championship bracket berth. So as you can see, we've got San Diego State on your left there at number 1 overall. They won their huge game against New Mexico this weekend. Here it is on screen. San Diego State, as expected. I said this was going to be a close game, and it was. Only a 2-point win for the Aztecs. Less than 2 points cleared the way for victory, and the Aztecs rose to the number 1 ranking in the league with this victory. They are looking at an opportunity to get an automatic bye into the Rose Bowl, which is the Final Four in this league. So the Aztecs with a huge win over the New Mexico Lobos, and it was looking really like it was going to be a walkthrough for the Aztecs. They were just going to cruise to victory until C.J. Stroud started throwing interceptions. In the first half, C.J. Stroud had about as many fantasy points as he ended up with. And the reason is because he threw 3 picks on the day. As you can see by CJ Stroud's season numbers, he has 5 interceptions on the season. He threw 3 this last weekend. That is more interceptions, obviously, than he had thrown all season long. He had come into the game with his passing touchdown to interception ratio looking very nice, and it still looks great, but unbelievable. And this has always been my fear for CJ Stroud as he is gaining confidence. Maybe he gets a little overconfident and he starts throwing more of these interceptions. Early in the year, you could tell he was being very careful. He was definitely limiting his throws to the most sure things, and every once in a while opening up and displaying that great accuracy that he has. But for the most part, he was keeping it reasonable and limiting the interceptions. As you all know, he set records for not throwing interceptions as a rookie for like the most games without an interception. It was an unbelievable stretch early in the year. A look at his game log shows that he didn't throw his first interception in the NFL until week 6 against the New Orleans Saints. And then he went a full 2 weeks beyond that, 2 games beyond that, without another interception until week 10 when he threw 1. And then this last week against the Arizona Cardinals of all teams, he throws 3 interceptions. He also threw for a couple of touchdowns, of course, but again, I would just like to see CJ limit this kind of stuff. So with the win, the Aztecs move to the first overall position in the league, and that means that if they win outright, they have a trip to the Rose Bowl in store for them. They have Michigan and Fresno State on the schedule. Michigan's going to be a tough game. Fresno State, who knows? They haven't really been playing that well, so I imagine that the Aztecs' big challenge is coming up this week against the Wolverines. As for the New Mexico Lobos, Phil Johnson's team, he has Maryland this week. Maryland is still the number 3 overall team in spite of their loss this week to, I believe it was the Colorado Buffaloes. But Maryland is going to be a tough game, and Ohio State is actually a tough team. So New Mexico could see their ranking drop even further if they struggle in these 2 games. So they have a couple of important ones coming up for them. The Maryland Terrapins, following their loss to the Colorado Buffaloes, have New Mexico, as we just discussed, and then Oregon. So they have a sure win against Oregon, but this New Mexico game would go a long way for them. If they could win that one, they win the tiebreaker against the Lobos, and it could help them get all the way to the number 2 seed in the championship bracket playoffs. But that loss to Colorado was huge, as that could cause a tiebreaker situation for them where they lose a little bit of ranking at the end of the year. They hold their number 3 overall ranking because of their record, however. The Colorado Buffaloes, with their huge win, have maintained 4th place in the league, the 4th overall ranking. And Colorado has Fresno State coming up this week and then Michigan. So the Michigan game, obviously a tough one, but they'll be looking to get over against Fresno State for sure. And for Colorado, when you look at their box score and you look at their overall record, it would be nice for them if they could just win both games. As you can see, they have a 7-4 record, just 1 game behind the Maryland Terrapins, and 1 game no, 2 games behind New Mexico. They could make a move in the standings as well. The Crimson Tide, after their win over Fresno State, which was kind of a walkthrough for them, they played a very nice game with Justin Fields returning to the lineup. They faced Georgia, who suffered a pretty tough loss this week, and that's going to be a tough battle. And they're going to play against Penn State. Penn State, of course, beat Georgia. So these two teams are going to be tough. That's is not going to be an easy task at hand for the Alabama Crimson Tide, who come into this game. As you look at the standings here, you can see that the Tide are 7-4. They actually haven't totally clinched a championship bracket berth because there could be some tiebreakers here. And again, when you talk about the tiebreakers and you look at the record for the Alabama Crimson Tide, you see that they have a big win this week. No, not this week, but they had a win against Texas. They had a win against Michigan, and they had a win against New Mexico. But these are teams like New Mexico, perhaps, is not going to be a team that they're going to have a tiebreak scenario with. It's teams like Michigan that they got to worry about, and Texas. And fortunately for them, they do have tiebreakers against those teams. But there's also teams like California that they have lost to. And if Georgia takes them down and Penn State takes them down, they're definitely going to have some issues. I think that this Alabama team still has a lot of work to do. They are far from being out of the woods. The California Golden Bears, run by Phil Johnson, have a 6-5 record. You can see it right there. They're sitting there tied with Penn State and Georgia. They're just a game up on Michigan, who's not dead yet. You also have Texas sitting there at 5-6. The teams ahead of them include Alabama and Colorado, just 1 game ahead. So a huge game coming up for this team, California, this week as they take on Penn State, and then next week against Texas. Again, 2 very tough games. And I'll talk a little more about all of these games as the week goes on. I plan on doing a little bit of work in this league on Thanksgiving Day, that is tomorrow, and probably something on Friday because I do have that day off. It's going to be raining. I don't think I'll be going out and doing much that day because of the weather. So I'm going to hunker down here at the house, and I'm going to go over some of these games. And also, there'll be some results from the Thanksgiving Day games. So we'll already have something to talk about come Friday and even possibly Thursday because the games are very early. I will be doing the transactions as normal on Thursday. I'll just do them as early as possible. And it doesn't matter if the games are already going. I'm just going to text those who get the text and just check the list for the teams who like to use their list. And we'll figure out, the draft that way. Penn State has already been involved in a lot of this talk of schedules. They've come up a couple of times because we've already talked about California and Alabama. It's very nice that these teams are all playing each other down the stretch because it should sort some things out for us. And maybe we won't even have to deal with the tiebreaker. But something tells me there might be 8 teams with 7 wins. So this tiebreak, these games, these tiebreakers are going to become very important. And I'm going to analyze the schedule. I fell behind by a day yesterday because I was obsessed with the basketball league, like I talked about earlier. I fell behind a little bit in my analysis, so I'm going to check out these schedules and come up with a more of a concise, clear picture of which games really are the most important. Georgia comes in with 6 wins. They suffered a very tough loss to Penn State this week by less than a point. That was a tough one. I really thought Georgia was going to get over easily in this game. It didn't work out. They face Alabama this week. That's a tall order. And then they've got Tulane, and Tulane is not going to be an easy team to beat either. So Georgia still has a lot of work to get out of the weeds here. And as you can see, they lose to Penn State. That could be a potential tiebreaker game. They did have a win over Texas, but that's not necessarily going to be a tiebreak game. They lost to Maryland, Colorado. They beat Michigan. That's going to be a potentially big victory for them, as that could be a tiebreaker game. They also lost to California. That could be a tiebreak game. So a lot of work yet to do for the Georgia Bulldogs for them to survive into the championship round. Michigan comes in at 5-6, and they have a tough game coming up this week playing against the San Diego State Aztecs, the number 1 team in the league right now. They've also got the number 4 ranked Colorado Buffaloes. I said it before last week that Michigan really has the toughest road to the championship bracket. And their last two losses against Maryland and California really hurt them, especially this week against Cal. I thought they were going to win this game. They ended up losing it. It was a close game like I expected it to be, but they came up on the short end. So it looks like Gerald Lane's Michigan Wolverines are going to have a tough road to the championship bracket, as they need at least one win against these two teams coming up, SDSU and Colorado. And finally, we have 6-5 Texas. Texas comes in off of a big win over Ohio State that they needed. Ohio State, of course, wasn't really a tough team to beat. As you can see, they only scored 30 points. But Texas really needed that win after they have struggled since week 5. They have lost 4 games since that time and only won 2. So they really need to finish strong. They need to beat Tulane this week, and then they have a huge game coming up against California. The California could very well be a tiebreaker game. They have losses to Georgia, Michigan, Penn State, and Alabama, all teams that could be part of tie-break scenarios. They have very few wins here against teams that they might face a tiebreaker situation with. So these last 2 games are huge for Texas. They did survive beating Ohio State, but now they need to win these next 2, I think. And if they do win the next 2, which they can, this team will earn its way into the championship bracket, because I seriously doubt there's going to be 8 teams with 8 victories. So that's it for the show today. I'm going to do a little research. I'm going to try to avoid spreadsheets for the next 24 hours or so and take a look at things so I can come back with a little bit more of a game preview for some of these big games coming up. We talked about all the matchups. I like the fact that there's a lot of tie-break scenarios coming up, that a lot of teams that are in the running are playing one another over this weekend, and it will give us a chance to sort things out a little further. We have 2 weeks left, so there's plenty of opportunity for everybody to solidify their spot in the championship bracket. And teams like San Diego State and New Mexico, of course, are going to try to battle it out with each other to get back into that number 1 spot. If San Diego finds themselves struggling this week against Michigan, they could be right back in second place, sitting behind the Lobos. But they do have the benefit of tiebreakers against both New Mexico and Maryland. So San Diego State, believe it or not, is in the driver's seat. Well, that's going to be a wrap. I think I'm going to try to get out and do something constructive today, get a little exercise before I have to go to work. It's a beautiful day out there, and it might be the last 80-degree day for a while here in San Diego, so I better get out and do something about it. I'll talk to you guys real soon, probably tomorrow. See you guys later.